Hello and welcome to the SCI GUYS, the show where we talk about the crazy, weird, and wonderful stories from the science world. I'm Corey, and as always, I'm joined by my co-hosts, Jamp and Luke Cutford.
Hello.
Hi, howdy.
This week, we're talking about basic human rights.
Oh, goodness me.
But first, why don't we look at Spotify?
Sure.
Is that where the basic human rights are?
No. Although it is a right to us. I think it's a basic right for the SCI GUYS to have lots and lots of Spotify followers.
Yes.
Basic right.
Great.
How many followers do you think we've got on
how many?
Spotify now?
37,000.
Oh, I was going to say 38,000.
38,555.
Goodness me.
I know, it's wild,
So
right?
popular.
And 61,661 listeners. Insane.
Just to put that in perspective, imagine we're 3 people. Imagine you times that by more than 10,000.
Imagine each of us had 10,000 children. That still would not make up all of the followers that we have on Spotify. So thank you very much for supporting us. And if you want to help us just a little bit more, why don't you tell a friend about us on Spotify? Get them to follow. And if you're listening and you're not a follower, what? Follow us, please.
It's one button away. It's not hard.
So, moving on from that, we have a little question for you all. We have just a tiny little question. And if you're listening on Spotify or if you're listening on Apple or anywhere else, get to YouTube and answer this question in the comments. Are you pro-choice or are you anti-choice?
Oh.
Yeah. This is in reference to abortions because it's a basic human right and that's what we're talking about this week.
Makes sense.
So Roe v. Wade was overturned in the US recently, threatening the rights of many, many Americans to access basic health care, abortions. So I thought we would take a look at Henry Morgentaler, a doctor who fought exceptionally hard to expand abortion rights in Canada and also to protect them. Yeah? Yeah. So what do you know about abortion rights in the UK?
In the UK.
You know
In the
what?
UK.
Nothing, actually.
Nothing?
Well, apart from you can get one.
Yeah. If one wants an abortion, one can seek an abortion.
I know nothing about the history.
So this is a quote from, I think, some government website somewhere. It says, abortion in the United Kingdom is legally available through the Abortion Act in 1967 in Great Britain and the Abortion Northern Ireland No. 2 Regulations 2020. In England, Scotland, Wales, abortion is permitted on the grounds of risk to the life of the pregnant person, preventing grave permanent injury to their physical or mental health, risk of injury to the physical or mental health of the pregnant person or any existing children of the family up to a term limit of 24 weeks of gestation, or substantial risk that if the child were born, they would suffer from such physical or mental abnormalities as to be seriously handicapped. So the way that third ground is sort of used, it's talking about risk to injury or mental health of the person. That basically, if you want one, that you can kind of get it on that ground.
They kind of like broaden their definition of that.
Yeah. So, I mean, a quote here, this is literally from Wikipedia. It says, the third ground is typically interpreted liberally with regards to mental health to create a de facto state of abortion on demand, and nearly all abortions, 98% in 2019 and 2020, are performed to protect the person's mental health. And in Northern Ireland, abortion is permitted on similar grounds, although the law also permits abortion in the first 12 weeks of a pregnancy for any reason, as is also the case in the rest of Ireland, apparently.
Well, what's really interesting about that then is that we don't then have in England, Scotland and Wales an actual written legal basis, or at least according to what you've written, for just wanting an abortion.
Yep.
Exactly the same situation as in America. If someone decides to reinterpret the law, it's gone.
Yep.
Oh, no.
Yep.
Whoa.
Yeah, this is so.
But you do in Northern Ireland.
Yeah, I was under the impression that Northern Ireland and Ireland abortion just wasn't really available. But the UK, it's one of those situations kind of like divorce, right? You think divorce in the UK is fully sort of legalized. You're able to get a divorce whenever you want in the UK, right?
No,
Yeah.
you are.
You're not allowed to.
You have
No,
to
you
have
can't.
grounds for
Wait, really?
divorce.
You need. There are specific requirements for grounds for divorce. So you need to have either one person say, I'm the bad person in this divorce, and you could get the divorce, or you have to go through a period of separation for, I think, about 3 years. This is all off the top of my head, I think. By the way, so this might be a little bit off. But you need to be separated for 3 years, and then you could get a divorce, I think maybe after a certain period of time. But there's nothing in the UK yet to just get a divorce for whatever reason you want. You can't get married and then say, I don't want to be married to this person anymore. Give me a divorce. I think they're trying to put it through. It might have gone through already, There's some changes being made, but as far as I'm aware, at time of recording, there is no divorce in the UK
That's so
that is
silly.
just free to anyone for any reason, and there's also no written sort of just free abortion for anyone, you know.
Yeah.
And by free, I don't mean it doesn't cost anything. I mean
I just want one.
you can get one,
Yeah.
you know, just because you want one. Yeah, which is insane, right? You know,
Yeah.
we talk about abortion rights in the US being terrible, but in the UK, they could definitely be improved. They are okay here, but they could definitely be improved. So, moving on from the rights, let's get on to the science of abortion. So, generally, abortions are usually only carried out up to 24 weeks, which we've spoken about, and pregnancy usually lasts how many weeks?
50, no,
52.
40 weeks? 40 something weeks?
52 weeks.
Shut up. I remembered a number of weeks. 52 weeks in a year? Okay, something like 40 something weeks.
It is 40 weeks, yeah, which is roughly about 9 months, right? So
All right, guys.
52.
52 weeks pregnant for a whole year.
That'd be more convenient, though.
Yeah, because you'd always know what
Yeah.
the baby's birthday is going to be.
Yeah.
And the kid would always know what day their parents conceived them as
Yeah.
well. So, obviously, the pregnancy lasts 40 weeks. You can have an abortion up to 24 weeks. In extraneous circumstances, abortions can be carried out after that point. So, usually when the life of the mother is threatened or the parent is threatened, the pregnant person is threatened, or there are really severe issues with development of the fetus. So, under those circumstances, basically life or death for one or both parties involved, parent and fetus, right?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Now, there are different methods of abortion. Obviously, you could split them into two main categories, medical and surgical. Do you know anything about medical abortions?
Oh, goodness me.
Oh.
Well, no, I don't think so. I mean,
No?
I probably do. As soon as you start saying it, I'll be like, oh, yeah, but
Yeah.
no.
There's a pill you can take, right?
Yeah, exactly. So there's the abortion pill. That is what a medical abortion is. It's just
Oh, it's as simple as that.
It's as simple as that. Well,
Okay.
okay. Bearing in mind that this conversation is, I need to say this now because there's going to be someone that's already said it in the comments. Bearing in mind this conversation is being had between three people who don't have a uterus.
Sure.
I mean, we
Yeah.
could find one,
Not anymore.
but it wouldn't be of any use to us.
Yeah. What
So-
I meant by it is as simple as that is that there's one thing.
No,
It's
yeah,
not
yeah.
like three different
Oh,
things.
well,
if
there's-
it's this many weeks, then it's this thing. If it's, yeah.
We'll get into it a little bit. We'll
Yeah.
get a little bit more deep into it. It is a bit more complex than that. But
Okay.
yeah, I just want to put out there from the start, none of us have a uterus, obviously, but we're still going to talk about this because we should talk about these things. You know,
Sure.
we should talk about these things. It's a thing that we should all talk about. We're talking about it now.
Were no women available.
They're all
And that brings me on to my next point, which people are going to be in the comments as well. It's not just women that get pregnant, and
Oh,
it's not
God,
just
yeah, okay.
women that need abortions.
Yeah.
So, Luke,
I
check
made
your
an
privilege.
oopsie, I'm
Thank you.
sorry.
And if you're one of those people that's typing out that we're erasing women, blah, blah, blah. No, we're not. No, we're not. Women are more than pregnancy, and more people than women can get pregnant. So we're gonna use the language that is correct in this situation, I'm afraid.
And some women can't get pregnant. But what I found really interesting is when you were reading out the sort of rules, the rules there said the person who's pregnant or the pregnant person. Did you just change that?
I swap out. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
I was like, wow, that's very progressive of the British law.
No. So if you
surprisingly so.
if you hear me, but functionally though, you could still get an abortion as a trans person, but it's still available to you if it's still available to you if you're a trans person.
But I suppose dangerously so, if you have a government who decides to come in, if the laws are written out as woman.
This is from Wikipedia. That
Right,
I got this.
okay.
So it was. Some of it might have been quoted from like directly.
Yeah.
But I was reading it out from Wikipedia.
But yeah, all I mean is that like because laws are endlessly interpretable, if you get some dreadful government come in and all the laws are written out as woman, and you've got people who are identifying as not woman and then are wanting an abortion, some dreadful government could go, well, it's either or, man.
Luke,
What are you going to do?
That is this dreadful government, and that actually happens.
This actually happens?
Not specifically that with abortions, but things saying mother and woman, they deny access to some people. So if a trans man were to have a child, I think there are issues with who is labeled as the mother on the birth
Right.
certificate.
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
I think, who was it? There was the guy that had the documentary done about him. I think it was like Butterfly it was called or something. I think he lived in Brighton or Hove, and he had a kid. And he, I think, had a court case to try and be listed as the father on the kid's birth certificate, but they would not do that.
Right.
Yeah. So that is that is this terrible government, and it is that kind of stuff is happening.
But as far as you're aware, they're not. What I was talking about is restricting access to abortions based on the technicalities of usage of words.
Not specifically abortions, no, but it is worth pointing out that they do restrict access to certain things based on the ways that laws are written, with gendered terms. Yeah. But when it comes to this, I'm probably going to be swapping out woman for person in most cases, even if it's written as woman, like by the NHS or whatever, because it's more correct, isn't it?
Yeah.
So let's just move on to the medical abortion, right? So the abortion pill. If you're less than 10 weeks pregnant, you can get it. You could get the abortion pill. You could do it at home. And after 10 weeks, the NHS says an abortion provider can discuss your options. And medical abortion involves taking 2 different medicines to end the pregnancy. So they're usually taken about 1 or 2 days apart. They've got to be prescribed by a hospital or a clinic, and it's passed through the vagina, and it usually happens a few hours after you take the second pill.
Wow, that's speedy.
Yeah.
That's fast turnaround.
Yeah. Well, how long did you think it would take?
I hadn't really thought about that part of it, I guess, because especially I imagine, and perhaps wrongly, I imagine the time where you can just take a pill or 2 pills to have an abortion, I would imagine the fetus is not particularly big, and so you maybe don't notice it. But actually, it probably goes up to a certain number of weeks where you actually are able to see it.
It's not just the fetus, remember?
Yeah.
Because there's more that goes on in the uterus than just a fetus growing in there.
Sure.
So you will probably pretty much definitely notice it.
Yes, no,
which
sure.
which is totally fair. Like this is what this is another reason that I think it's really interesting and important to do this conversation between the 3 of us, because we don't know.
Yeah,
there was stuff here that I was, because I've never looked into abortions before, not deeply.
Never gonna need one.
It's never going to specifically affect me.
Yeah.
So I don't need to have that sort of intimate knowledge with it.
But you probably should have been taught it.
No, I should have been. I should. No, I definitely should have been taught
Yeah.
it. But my mindset up until doing this episode was, I know the basics, and if it ever comes to,
I'll look it up.
Yeah, if it ever comes to it, I can look it up, right? But in my life, it's just not terribly likely that I'm ever going to come across. So
But to be fair,
I've never
that
looked
also
too deeply
might-
into it.
That also might be the case of people who can have babies. They
Yeah.
might actually just know the basics and not look up the details unless
Absolutely.
they decide they're going to have an abortion. So,
Yeah, absolutely.
although they might be more likely to have been taught it, but equally, maybe not.
Well, yeah, I mean, education on it is not necessarily great, because I found out a lot of stuff from this. And I mean, really, I think education on abortion, in a lot of cases, doesn't necessarily come from schools. It just comes from media, right? And it's really limiting when your education comes from pop culture. All you know about something is the joke that South Park makes, or a couple scenes in Juno or whatever, right? Like, it's not a good way to understand something. So back to the medical abortions, it doesn't need surgery or anesthetic, and the process is as follows. So you take a tablet that's got something called mifepristone in it, and that stops the main hormone for pregnancy, like the main pregnancy hormone. And you could take that at the hospital or the clinic, and you could go home afterwards and then just do whatever, do your normal stuff. And then a couple days later, you take a second pill that has misoprostol in it, and you put that under your tongue, between your cheek and gum, or inside the vagina, and you can usually take it at home if you're less than 10 weeks, as we said. But then if you're over 10 weeks, you got to discuss with the doctor or the medical professional. And then within about 4 to 6 hours of the second medicine, the lining of the uterus just starts to break down, and that's obviously going to be painful. Then there will be bleeding, and then you'll lose the pregnancy. It's essentially a sort of induced miscarriage, right? And you got to think about this as well, because I don't think we tend to consider this when we talk about abortions, that again, it's not just a fetus. The uterus has basically built itself up to support and create life. So you got to get rid of all that too. That's not very nice. It's not very pleasant to experience. So sometimes you might need to take more doses of the second drug to actually get it to pass. But sometimes it doesn't pass, and then you need to have surgery to remove it. But generally it is pretty straightforward in taking 2 pills. Obviously, it's not quite as simple as popping a pill. squeezing it out, going on with your day. Like it's not a very fun or simple or whatever experience. It can be kind of psychologically damaging. It can be really difficult to go through. It can be painful, all that sort of stuff. So it's not just sort of like it's not something you should be scared of, but also it's not a walk in the park either, you know?
Yes, it's not that thing that the people on the right sometimes say of like that people are getting abortions for fun. Like there are people who genuinely say that. They're like, oh, people get pregnant in order to have abortions because they love it. It's like, shut up.
Sure. Okay. I'm sure. Just like I'm sure there are people that get pregnant because they get horny from it, right? But like we don't usually talk about those people because they're kind of a very small number and at the fringes, right?
Yeah.
Maybe there is one person on this planet who gets an abortion for fun. Maybe, you know?
Maybe.
It's not the point, though.
Maybe. I still think not.
No, my point is, right, that I think it's unlikely. Like, we both agree on that.
Yeah.
But my point is that even if a few people were doing that, who cares? It's not the point. Like, people still need access to basic reproductive healthcare.
Sure.
Which is what abortions are, right? Moving on to surgical abortion. So that involves an operation to remove the pregnancy from the uterus, and you do that with local anesthetic on the cervix to numb that, or conscious sedation, which is when you're like all relaxed, like chilled out, but you're still conscious. And then there's also deep sedation or general anesthetic where they put you under. So most people usually will get deep sedation and they don't remember anything. And you know, it's like a normal operation, right? Obviously if you've got general anesthetic as well, you'll be fully under and you won't remember anything either. So what kind of anesthetic you get or sedation you get is kind of dependent on what's going on with you. It's not like a sort of, I'll just pick whichever one I want.
Which do you want? Do you want to feel woozy or sleepy?
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, you do have some element of choice, but it also depends on how far along you are as well. So before you have a surgical abortion, you've got to relax or open the cervix. And you do that by there's just some drugs that you take to do that. Usually a few hours or a couple of days before the operation, depending on which one you're using. And there are two different methods of surgical abortion. Do you know what those two methods are?
I was going to say that I don't know how any of these operations go. I've seen them depicted in media, but it's always like the camera just like cuts away to another room or something.
I would imagine if there's two, one is going up the way the baby would come out, and one is opening up the way you'd have a C-section.
No, actually, as far as I'm aware, both of them are going up. It's just what you do when you're up there.
Is one of them essentially like a Hoover?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The suction one.
I mean, like it's not nice to think about, but that I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
You are talking about vacuum or suction aspiration.
Sure.
So that can be used up to 14 weeks.
And do you know why it would? Because you can have the pill after 10 weeks. And so do you know why you would pick that one rather than the pill? Is it if the pill isn't working?
I'm not really sure exactly why. I mean, obviously, it could be things like, you know, your body not necessarily dealing well with the medication, or like you said, the medication not necessarily working. But I'm not specifically sure. I've not actually found anything that delineates why. But moving back onto the vacuum or suction aspiration. So you basically just insert a tube up into the womb through the cervix, which is the opening to the womb from the vagina. So at the back of the vagina, you've got the cervix, which is kind of like this. It's this opening that's usually like quite. Like, you're not getting up through there usually, right? Well, you know, you're not going up into the uterus often, right? You know, that's my point.
Not that far.
Yeah, no. So you insert a tube up into the vagina, through the cervix, into the uterus, and then you just suck essentially. And if anything gets stuck, then the doctor can use other sort of tools to help sort of remove the pregnancy. That usually takes about 5 to 10 minutes, and most people go home after a few hours.
Wow.
Yeah, a few hours later. So it's like it's a fairly sort of quick in and out procedure. Again, obviously, that doesn't mean that there's no sort of there's nothing after that. It doesn't mean that you're feeling 100% on top of the world right afterwards. That you just doing it for fun or whatever.
Yeah,
you know.
I can't imagine you feel great after something like that.
Yeah, no, absolutely not.
That method sounds like it's less hormone based in that you have a relaxant for your cervix, but then the rest is physical, whereas the other one is like inducing a miscarriage,
essentially,
which is a lot more hormone based, I imagine.
Exactly. Yeah. So that is vacuum. aspiration or suction aspiration. There's also dilation and evacuation, and that is used after 14 weeks of pregnancy, so from 14 to 24 or beyond, obviously, if there's further complications. So that is essentially just inserting special sort of instruments. It's forceps. It's inserting forceps up there. How do you know it's...
I've absorbed it across through media.
Okay, cool.
I don't know. Yeah.
So I'm taking all of this from the NHS, by the way. So that's why there's these weird little phrases and whatnot. So essentially, inserting forceps through the cervix into the womb and removing the pregnancy that way. So usually you'll be sedated or under general anesthetic, so you'll be put out. It takes about 10 to 20 minutes, and you can go home the same day. So it's like it's all of these abortions are essentially like a 1-day procedure in terms of, apart from the medical one, it's done over a number of days, but you're only going to be sort of out of commission usually for the day. Like you can leave hospital within the day, you know.
You might be mentally not very...
That's what I was about to say. Just because there isn't necessarily, you know, an incredibly long-lasting physical toll. There absolutely could be, by the way. Like this, like it's not it's not going to be
nothing.
comfortable. It's not nothing.
Yeah.
But just because it's not necessarily as physically taxing as one might assume, despite the fact that it is still quite physically taxing, there is the mental aspect as well. Because even if you don't want the pregnancy, it's still a whole thing, right? As well, you know, and also the hormones as well can affect your mood. It's a difficult thing.
It kind of breaks down into sort of almost like 3 different categories of mental taxing. There's like literally the hormones and what that's doing to you, like your hormones released from losing a pregnancy. I imagine that happens, that kind of thing, or withdrawal from hormones that you had due to pregnancy. That may also be the case. Then you've got just the feeling of being a person and that being a not nice thing to go through. And then you've got like the social part of like, you've sort of been, you know, you there's all these complex things about what you're so like what society has told you about abortions, or what society has told you about if you're a woman, about being a woman, all that other stuff. There's so many layers to it.
Exactly.
Yeah. Not nice.
And we don't, I feel like often when we talk about this, we don't consider any of this. We don't consider the reality of abortions. You know, we don't consider that it's just basic reproductive health care. It's essentially a sort of last resort in terms of if you're using protection or you're using, you know, other sort of forms of contraception. If they don't work, or if you forget them, or there's a situation where you don't use anything like that, you sort of miss the morning after pill, then you have to move on to an abortion, right? Like it's not it's not something people are, you know, just choosing to do because of, whatever, I'll just get one, usually, right? That's not the case. And I think we often talk about it being really important in terms of just, I guess, sort of, you know, instances where people are forced into pregnancy through, you know, other people forcing themselves on them, all of that sort of stuff. We talk about, you know, like, oh, when children are pregnant, or all of these like horrible situations. But even outside of those, the abortion is still really important, because you should not force a child on someone who isn't ready or willing to have a child. They're just gonna have an unhappy child. You can't use adoption as a sort of fix for that, because it's just the adoption industry is broken, very broken, and it's not, you know, there's so many kids that are like, you know, up for adoption. Why would you add another one onto that list? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So dilation and evacuation, as I said, after 14 weeks, you put forceps into the womb and remove the pregnancy. You can go home the same day. So afterwards, you usually don't need to have any other tests or appointments. You can just kind of be left to your own devices. But if you've had a medical abortion at home, you might need to have a special sort of pregnancy test or scan just to make sure that it's actually worked.
Right.
Yeah. So once all of that sort of happened, you know, you could have sort of side effects for a little bit, you know, diarrhea, feeling sick, all of that stuff from the medicines that you've got to take. You could also have sort of mental side effects afterwards, as we've spoken about. And for all types of abortion, it's pretty likely that you're going to have sort of stomach cramps and vaginal bleeding. Obviously, you'll probably have vaginal bleeding. It usually lasts about a week or two, and sometimes really light bleeding can last up to a month. But afterwards, you can obviously take painkillers, use sanitary towels and pads instead of using tampons, and you can have sex pretty much as soon as you feel ready. But also, you should use contraception. Like you shouldn't think, oh, I've just done this, so it'll probably be fine. You can be you can be fertile pretty much immediately after abortion. Yeah, because I mean, look, if that kind of body, female bodies generally they want to just they want to get pregnant and make a kid. That's often what your body is like wanting to do. So we've got to do a lot of think about think about contraception, how much we actually have to do to stop that from happening. You know what I mean? It's just like,
and even then, there's like loads of like the failure rates of contraception are still kind of high.
Exactly. Even if there's like a 1% failure rate of condoms, like think about how many times you use a condom.
Yeah.
Right. Like if you're using
quite high.
Exactly. 1% is 1% is high. Using it 100 times,
Oh no!
Yeah.
Oh, damn.
On your 99th time, you're like, never again.
Never going to use a condom.
I got away with it this long.
I'm switching to
It's
pulling
100%
out.
chance.
That's how statistics work.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so you can usually get back to normal activities when you feel comfortable. It's one of those things where it's kind of down to how you're feeling and all that sort of stuff. But it's not something you should be terribly scared of. You'll have lots of support when doing it, and it's pretty safe as well. It is, I think, safer than having a child at the very least. So there you go. Ding-a-ling-ling, is that the ad bell?
I suppose it is.
Oh, it's so loud.
Well,
My ears.
it's loud because we're advertising something very important.
Yeah, the most important thing.
It is SciGuys.co.uk.
Goodness me, that sounds important.
It is very, very important. What's SciGuys.co.uk, I hear you ask me?
It's our website.
What's
SciGuys.co.uk?
Yes, well, I'll tell you what SciGuys.co.uk is. It is our website. Now, if you head there, you can find a whole bunch of stuff. It is just the hub for everything Sci Guys. If you want to get to our Discord or our YouTube or our Apple Podcast or our Spotify or anything else, all of our socials, head to SciGuys.co.uk. It's like a link tree, but it's got more stuff on it.
It's like an app, but before apps exist.
Yeah, you have to go in the browser to use it.
SciGuys.co.uk. Henry Morgentaler. Do you know who Henry Morgentaler is?
Top bloke.
Yeah, he's a good
Did
guy.
he invent abortion?
He did not invent abortions. No, he was a doctor in Canada. We'll get to that in a bit, though. Let's go through his early life. So he was born in Poland. His name is Henry Morgentaler. He's called Henry. His name is, I think it's like Hebrew or something, or Yiddish. Henrik. I don't know how to pronounce it. Henrik. I'm sorry. I tried to look it up. I literally cannot find it. His name is Henry Morgentaler, okay? He was born in 1923 in Poland. His mother was a seamstress, and his father was a textile worker and union organizer.
Wow, woke king.
Yeah. Oh, you're going to feel so bad for making a joke right before.
Oh, no.
Dude, he was born in Poland in 1923. Where did you think I was going with this? And he's Jewish as well.
Oh, no.
Come on, man. So he was forced to live in a Jewish ghetto after Nazis invaded Poland when he was 16. His dad was killed by the Gestapo whilst trying to escape. His sister was sent to the Treblinka concentration camp where she was killed. In 1944, the rest of the family, Henry, his brother, and his mother, were sent to Auschwitz, where his mother died. And then Henry Morgentaler and his brother were then interned at Dachau until 1945. And so not only is he an absolute badass, as you'll find out, he's also a Holocaust survivor. And it's always incredible to me just think about how recent this actually is. Like, this guy died at 90 years old in 2013.
Wow.
Like, all of this is mad recent history.
Scary.
Yeah, terrifying. So, moving on from that, his education and like his later life and his family. In 1946, he enrolled at the Marburg-Lan University in Marburg in Germany as a medical student. And then 1947, he transferred to Brussels, Belgium, and continued studying medicine. And then in 1949, he married a woman named Shava Rosenfarb, and she was also a concentration camp survivor. And then he finished his medical degree in 1949 as well. And then in 1950, to get work as a physician, they moved to Montreal. So they immigrated to Canada, Quebec. And he then started studying more medicine at the Université de Montréal in Montreal, Quebec.
Very good.
Yeah. Moving on.
A few months after starting studying, his wife gave birth to their first kid, Goldie. And then in 1953, he finished his medical studies. And then in 1955 was when he finally became a doctor, because that was also the year that he became a Canadian citizen, and Canadian law meant that you couldn't be a doctor or practice medicine unless you were a Canadian citizen.
Really?
Yeah.
It was the 50s.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, that could still be the case now. I don't know. I didn't look into it. So Canadians, let us know.
Justin Trudeau.
Oh, Justin Trudeau is actually. I'm glad you mentioned him.
Oh, yeah?
Because someone comes up that's related to Justin Trudeau. So just to give you an overview again of Morgentaler's sort of education, he started studying in 1946, and then in Germany, and then moved to Brussels, and then finally moved to Canada, where he became a doctor, like a practicing doctor, in 1955. So it was like 9 years, which actually, when you think about it, is roughly about the time that it takes to be a doctor now. You know, you go to uni, and then it takes about 8 years, and then you're like, you know, well, you're a doctor in those intervening years, but it's 8 years, I think, to be fully finished with all of the education stuff, which is weird. It only takes 8 years before you're able to be like a doctor and look after people's health.
You can heal anybody.
Yeah, it doesn't feel very long, right? Like, what have I been doing for 8 years?
Yeah, quite quick, actually.
You know? So obviously, in 1955, he became a doctor. He opened his own clinic. And then in 1956, his son Abraham was born. So that's his second child. And he then focused on family planning at his clinic, giving couples birth control pills and performing vasectomies.
He focused on making people not have children after the birth of his second child.
Yeah.
He was like,
no,
this was a mistake. Let's make sure this never happens ever again.
I will never let this happen to another human being.
This is not me putting these two things together.
Yeah.
This is a bio I read on him, which mentioned both of these things one after the other.
Yeah.
I don't know why.
Then he had his second child and decided to open up a family planning clinic.
And then he had his third child and he started giving out free abortions to everyone that came. No.
I didn't go far enough the first time.
I hate these things. We can't have any more of them. No. That's not the case. That's not the case.
Too many of them.
Obviously, you know, so you could see from 1956, he was focusing on family planning, which is insane. In 1956, he was giving out vasectomies. He was giving couples birth control pills. You know, that was mad, right? So
when you say giving out, was he doing it for free?
No.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
No. I mean, he later on he does stuff for as free as he can make it, like basically just covering costs, right? Because he is genuinely just an awesome sounding guy. He cheated on his wife, had issues with that, but look, people are complex. They contain multitudes. He did a lot of good work.
We had another reason why he might want to make birth control very freely available if he's cheating on his wife.
Jesus, Luke.
Sorry. I'm just saying.
Although contraception and protection is absolutely important, whether or not you are cheating on your wife. Although if you are cheating, especially if you are cheating on your wife, especially.
Just cut that.
No, I like that. That's funny.
You don't want evidence.
Oh my god.
Oh my god.
Back to Henry Morgentaler. I want to talk about his work with abortion. So at the time, abortions were just entirely outlawed in Canada due to the first Canadian Criminal Code of 1892. And because of that law, Morgentaler was turning away women that came to him asking about abortions. And then in 1967, so about a good 12 years after opening his practice, he presented a brief to the Canadian House of Commons Health and Welfare Committee in which he fought for women's rights to abort an unplanned or unwanted pregnancy. You'll notice I said women's here. Obviously, this is back in 1967, so at that point, he was fighting for women's rights to pregnancy. So, that year, Pierre Trudeau...
grandfather of Justin.
Yeah. Canada's then Justice Minister introduced the Criminal Law Amendment Act, partially decriminalising abortion, but only in extenuating circumstances. So, when a life was at risk. Yeah. If you're going to die, or if it starts between sort of like, you know, having the kid and dying, or having an abortion, you're now allowed to choose to have an abortion instead of just dying.
That feels like that should not ever have been controversial, let alone now.
Well, Luke, you see, the difference in the issue is that, right, once a woman has gotten to childbearing age and she's had the child, what is she good for? And she could also be having a baby boy, which is obviously above woman, right?
Yes.
And that's why abortions were outlawed. Those are not my thoughts, by the way. Obviously, those aren't my thoughts. That's just how people viewed it, right? Obviously.
Oh, I thought that was your thoughts.
No. Surprisingly, I think that women are people and deserve the same rights as any other person.
That's so unlike you.
You
right?
bloody communist.
Whoa. You got me. So in 1967, that was when the sort of bill, when the whole idea was kind of put forward. And then in 1969, it passed. It became law. And at that point, Trudeau was the Prime Minister of Canada.
Wow.
Not our current Trudeau. Back then, Trudeau. Pierre Trudeau, not Justin.
Trudeau.
Was it actually his granddad?
So in 1969,
Yeah.
Pierre Trudeau was Prime Minister. His son is Justin Trudeau, who is currently Prime Minister. I thought it was like his
He
uncle.
must have either been a very young Prime Minister, a very old dad, or Justin Trudeau is a very old Prime Minister.
Yeah, Justin Trudeau is his eldest son as well. He's 50 years old.
Wow.
Justin Trudeau.
Yeah, Justin Trudeau is 50 years old.
Shut up.
Bloody hell.
Absolutely mad. So back to abortion rights in Canada. Looking past the fact that it's just not adequate in and of itself, its implementation meant that the abortions weren't hugely accessible. So here's a quote from embryo.asu.edu. The law stated that only public hospital physicians could perform abortions under the stipulation that a 3-physician panel determined that the woman's life was in peril if she gave birth. Morgentaler said that the law did not grant sufficient rights to women because the committees seldom met and most hospitals still refused to provide abortions. So, let's go through this a little bit. The way that the laws were in Canada back then were that you can get an abortion if your life is in peril, but 3 doctors, read men, have to come together, which they don't do very often, and decide whether your life is in peril or not before you can get an abortion.
Right. That
Which
sounds almost like that's very difficult to do.
Yeah.
Despite being legal.
Yeah.
Would that be a okay assessment of that, Corey?
Yeah. Oh, speaking of marijuana, I'm going to make that legal, but also to get it, you must climb to the top of Mount Everest. It's the only legal way. You have to. That's where the dispensary is. Climb to the top of Mount Everest, and you got it.
Fair enough. Can't just give them out willy-nilly.
No, but it's legal, and it's equal access to everyone.
Got to make sure they deserve it.
It's almost like decriminalizing something, but still making the sale of it illegal.
Yeah, exactly.
And not selling it anywhere legally.
Yeah, so it was partially legalized, but in practice, abortions were still just not really easy to get. Because think about this, as I've already kind of said, you would have to go to a hospital. The hospital would have to sort of basically refer you to a 3-person panel.
3 men, yeah.
Yeah, which would at that point have been probably 3 men, who then decide whether or not your life is in peril, and all of that's going on. And at that point, you're still needing an abortion.
Yeah, life is still in peril.
Yeah, you're still continuing to be pregnant and become more pregnant as time goes on. Like, it's not
Could you just
remotely good.
Baby, could you just wait a second?
Yeah, hang on while these doctors decide whether you're gonna like sort of threaten my life or not.
Stop growing.
Exactly.
One sec.
So, what did Morgentaler do? He performed the abortions anyway.
No way.
Yeah, absolute mad lad.
Whoa.
Okay.
Yeah. So he established his own abortion clinic in 1969. He charged relatively little. Basically, the idea was that people might otherwise choose a cheaper but less safe option. So he was like, okay, let's just make the prices as low as I possibly can, you know, and then people will come to me and I can give them a safe abortion instead of them going and trying to get one somewhere cheaper elsewhere, which is, this guy is awesome. I love him. An absolute badass. Like, I keep on saying that, but he absolutely is. You know, he survived the Holocaust and then he went on and gave abortions to people that need abortions when, you know, the law didn't let you give abortions. And there's a reason that I'm talking about this in particular with regards to Roe v. Wade. There's a reason that I chose to do this episode now. There's a reason I chose to speak about this man rather than talking about abortions in general, because there are plenty of people that have done, you know, like so much good work surrounding, you know, abortions and surrounding reproductive healthcare rights and all of that. And I know people are probably going to be critical of me choosing to talk about a man in this instance, but I feel like we need to talk about abortion from a lot of different perspectives, right? Like, obviously, there's the whole idea of, like, you know, no uterus, no opinion. Totally fair. Totally cool. But also, you can't just leave gaining and protecting abortion rights to people that need abortions. It's not necessarily a nice thing to do. I feel like we can all help in our own ways. And I'm not sitting here advising that anyone listening to this, anyone who is a doctor or anyone who sort of provides abortions, you know, I'm not suggesting that if it's outlawed wherever they are, that they should do it anyway. I would never suggest that someone should break the law. All I'm saying is that I think this guy is really cool for what he did, and let's leave it there. I'm not suggesting that you should break the law, and I'm not suggesting that you should do it.
There was an emphasis on two of those words there, Corey.
What?
There was
Oh
an
no,
emphasis on
I'll
two
try it
words.
again. So let me be clear.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that you should break the law and provide abortions to people that need them. I'm not saying that at all, and I would never, ever, ever suggest that. So, as I'm saying to you, don't break the law and provide abortions to people that need them. There we go.
Don't.
Right. Okay. Message received.
Back to Morgentaler.
I'm gonna train as an abortionist now. I've been successfully hypnotized by Corey.
Look. So back to Morgentaler. So what did he do? As I said, he charged as pretty much as little as he could, so that people he could ensure that people were going to come to him and not be put off by the price. Then in 1970, the police raided his clinic and arrested him and his staff for performing illegal abortions. So you know what he did?
What?
He kept on doing him.
Yeah, he posted bail immediately after his arrest and went right back to his clinic and continued providing abortions. And then he also continued to publicly advertise his clinic. So he wasn't doing this like he was out there saying, "Hello everyone, I will give you an abortion if you need one."
Get your abortions here.
And like what are they going to do? They can't abort a fetus, right? So he once he's helped people, they have been helped. Awesome. He's putting himself on the line because that's the only thing that they can do.
And I think, am I right in assuming that because abortion was technically legal in the country, but only under certain circumstances when signed off by certain people, that meant that if somebody who was pregnant got an abortion, they wouldn't be, even if that abortion was illegal, they wouldn't be in trouble because abortion was legal. Whereas what you have in situations where abortion's actually just illegal is you can be in trouble for getting an abortion.
I think the people might have been able to get in trouble.
Yes, because it was under certain circumstances. Yeah. If your life's in danger and you have to prove that.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not really sure what happened to the people that sort of got abortions, but as far as I'm aware, they were really mostly going after Morgentaler, the doctor, and the people that were working at his clinic. So, as I said, he was sent to jail, and not prison, he was sent to jail. He paid his bill, and then he went back to doing what he was doing, which is providing abortions, advertising that he's providing abortions, and being an absolute badass. So, the charges ended up being dropped because there was an improper use of a search warrant. The police apparently misused their search warrant, and so
they would do that.
No, I can't imagine that the police would do such a thing. Police doing bad thing?
Yeah, because if they did the bad thing, then they would be. The police would come and get them.
Who polices the police?
The police again.
Yeah, the police.
Police all the way down.
Yeah. So the charges were dropped, which is awesome, right? So by 1973, he claimed to have performed over 5,000 successful abortions. And bear in mind, he established the abortion clinic in 1969. So over 4 years, he said he'd done over 5,000 successful abortions. And on the 15th of August of that year, so 15th of August 1973, the police returned and arrested him for multiple counts of illegal abortions. So in 1973, the first trial started, and his defense team basically said that he was protecting the lives of his patients, right? That was his duty as a doctor, and that is what he was doing. And that went way more than some stupid little silly, you can't get abortions unless you blah 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 law. That was their defense. It's more important for a doctor to look after the life of a patient than it is for them to follow some other less important law, right? Which, absolutely. Right? I don't think that the law should get in the way, laws like that should get in the way of people getting the healthcare that they need, right? I'm going to be absolutely 100% honest here, and I'm going to say I don't think it's that bad when people get healthcare that is not technically allowed. If it's necessary healthcare, and the laws are kind of if we can all agree that the laws aren't great, I don't think it's that much of an issue, as long as they're aware of all the risks and all of that, all of those caveats, obviously. But I think it's one of those situations where you got to remember that morality and, and all of that sort of stuff is not directly related to the law. The laws do not dictate what are good and bad or what are moral and immoral, That's not what the law is for. Laws are rules that tell you what you can and can't do, and sometimes they suck. That's it.
True.
So he was in court, and the jury the jury agreed with his defense and acquitted him of all charges.
Fair play.
And then on the 26th of April 1974, the Quebec Court of Appeal overturned the acquittal, which is essentially, so like this sort of court overturned the appeal. So the jury was like, no, let him go. And someone appealed it, they brought it higher, and the higher court was like, no, screw you. This is, again, pointing out that ultimately the law and like the justice system, all this sort of stuff, it's not necessarily always going to work the way that it should, right? Like, if people believe that it is fine for a doctor to provide abortions to people that need abortions, the law could still get in the way and be like, actually, no. Just no. Like they'll circumvent, justice and the jury acquitting someone just to make a point about we don't want people getting abortions for some goddamn reason. Anyway, Morgentaler went to prison. He started serving 18 months in March of 1975. There was a whole load of outrage and controversy in Canada about this. And whilst he was in prison, he got more charges of illegal abortions. And then the jury acquitted him again. Look, this is that's why I like this story, because it's just a guy who is like, hey, there is a problem here. I don't care what the law says. I'm just gonna do the right thing.
Yeah. It's like the Canadian government's holding a big mallet and playing a game of whack-a-mole. Yeah. And they keep on trying to get him, and he pops down and he pops up somewhere else.
But, yeah.
And eventually they get him, and then the mallet's like, I'm not going to hit that guy.
I like this guy, right? The fact that 2 separate juries acquitted him just goes to show you, like, man, he's doing the right thing, and the law needs to catch up. Sometimes laws are like fall behind. Sometimes they catch up, and then a Supreme Court makes them fall behind again, And
that was specifically the problem in America, is that the law didn't ever catch up. They just relied on this judgment from years and years ago. They never turned it into, like, Obama was meant to turn it into law.
Supposed to codify it, yeah.
And then they never did. And then this random panel of judges can just go, we're going to reinterpret the past.
Nah.
And this is now illegal. It's like, what? That's just... Yeah, but there was loads of chances to flip and codify it.
And they kept on paying it off.
And it's a very difficult thing to codify because of the way that the system is and the way that sort of the anti-abortionists have a large sway in Congress. But...
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
Are you telling me that if you have lots of money and power and pull, you can sway Congress?
I'll look into it and I'll get back to you.
Wow, my world has been shattered.
It's possible.
Something about the oil industry and maybe the tobacco industry, something there as well.
Oil and tobacco. Well, we know the oil and tobacco industries aren't very nice people, but the evangelicals, they're good, right? They wouldn't do anything to impede.
I think they got a lot of money as well.
Really?
Yeah.
No, but they are good Christians, and they wouldn't do anything to impede democracy, would they?
Because Christians are nice.
Yeah, and there's a separation of church and state.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
Even if the evangelicals did want to influence, the rights of everyone else in the country, they wouldn't be able to.
There's no possible way.
You're right, I must be wrong. Don't worry. My mistake. I'm sorry, guys. What a ludicrous assertion.
Back to Morgentaler, as we left off, he was imprisoned. And he had another trial, which he was just acquitted of all charges. And while he was in prison, he had a heart attack, like a mild heart attack, and he was sent to a sort of different hospital. And then Canadian Parliament introduced an amendment, which is, kind of colloquially known as the Morgentaler Amendment, which disallowed appeal courts to reverse acquittal decisions from juries. Which, right?
Yeah.
Like if a jury acquits someone, yeah, exactly. It's like, okay, look, the jury is allowed to make a decision unless we disagree with that decision. In which case,
we can overturn it.
Yeah, we can overturn it.
Yeah.
It's a very weird.
Sounds reasonable.
Very weird form of democracy.
The jury, why am I here?
Well, you're here to make a choice.
You're there to agree with us,
unless you make the wrong choice. In which case,
I made a choice, and then you didn't.
You got to make your choice, and that's what counts.
You got it wrong.
So, if there's a right answer, why am I here?
To find the right answer.
No. It's not that there's necessarily a right answer. There's just the correct choice.
Yes.
Right.
And if you make the wrong one, you're free to make the wrong one.
And it's our responsibility to correct you.
Okay.
To protect you from yourself.
Sound like you're wasting my time.
But you're free to make any choice you want.
Okay.
You've got to sit
I'd
in a
like to
court for a few days.
Oh, true. You know what? Yeah, got out of work, didn't I?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he got out of prison 8 months early. Well, not prison. He was in hospital. So he got out 8 months early because, they'd sort of changed. They'd made an amendment, essentially, to stop that sort of thing from happening. So he got let out. And
What sort of thing from happening, sorry?
the sort of thing wherein you could be acquitted by a jury and then,
Right, yeah.
it could be sent to a court of appeals and they could overturn that acquittal.
Hang on a second. There's an idea that you can change a law and then people who were imprisoned for that law are let out?
That doesn't... No, I don't. I disagree with that entirely. I feel like if people broke a silly law...
Oh, yeah.
a silly law, that was then overturned,
Yeah.
they should still serve their sentence.
Right.
Because they're black. They did something wrong, sorry. They did a wrong thing.
Oh, yeah.
And
what
so
kind
they
of
should
other things might this be applied to, out of interest?
I don't know. Perhaps marijuana use?
Oh.
Which, again,
Yeah.
very dangerous criminals, very, very bad people. Selling marijuana is awful unless you're a white person, in
Just
which
the
case
worst.
it's enterprising.
Yeah. Oh, no.
Have a look at the stats on white-owned dispensaries and then come and talk to me. So, moving back to Morgentaler.
To tell me where they all are.
Mate, I just got back from a US trip. I think I know where they all are.
A US trip?
So he was released from prison and then he...
Had a party.
Went
Did
right
more
back to
abortions.
abortions.
No. Then he was charged again for illegal abortion.
No way.
The police are not stopping here. Like the police, they raided, bear in mind, at this point, by 1976, they had raided his clinic and then had to drop all the charges because they didn't use the search warrant properly. And then they had more charges, they sent him to prison, and then he got let out of prison because, the jury acquitted him, but the court had overturned it, and that's why he went to prison. So he got out of prison, and then they're like, no, we're going to try to send you to prison again. Like the police, the sort of justice system are just not stopping trying to send this man away for providing basic reproductive health care.
Are they just trying to waste his time so he can't do any more abortions?
That sounds about right, actually. That makes sense. Yeah, no. Imagine he was performing them in prison, right? Like, he faked a heart attack to get to a hospital, and he's just like, okay, no, just bring it.
Where's the pregnant people?
Well, it's really weird. Like, Morgentaler has a lot of visitors, and they're all pregnant. So I don't know what's going on. So, January 1976, they charged him for performing illegal abortions. And then the jury acquitted him of all charges again.
No
For a
way.
third time.
For a third time.
Brilliant.
And then just after that, a separatist political party was elected into office in Quebec. And that essentially meant that the province had been quite socially conservative and influenced by the Catholic Church, according to sort of my sources I'm reading. And then after that, that kind of changed when this new party came in. And so they stopped trying to basically pursue legal action against Morgentaler. So
Hooray!
that quick change of like a party coming in,
Yeah.
like a new party coming into government in Quebec meant that Morgentaler was now kind of just left alone to his own devices. And so after all of that, he then decided that he should start publicly advocating for being for the abortion healthcare rights, for being pro-choice. And so in 1976, he basically brought the case that brought forth this case, Morgentaler v. the Queen.
Our queen.
Okay, so when you're
Because it's
bringing
Canada.
sort of a case against the state, it's against the Queen, right?
Yeah.
Because she's the state.
Yeah.
It's 1976. Okay, like I don't know what you want me to do.
Morgentaler be the queen.
Fight abortions. Lizzie feels very strongly about that. So he presented this case and he lost that appeal in a 6-3 decision. And then in 1979, he filed for divorce, left his wife because of cheating, which I mentioned earlier. And he then got a new wife, Carmen Wernley. He married her in 1979 and she gave birth to another child, their son, Jan, in 1980. And then they divorced in 1983. Not super relevant.
Oh, whoa.
Yeah, this guy is... Look, he had a few wives and he has a lot of kids. But he's awesome when it comes to like, you know, abortion healthcare rights, as far as I'm aware, like, you know, being an advocate for being pro-choice. So in 1983, Morgentaler got together Leslie Smalling and Robert Scott, two other physicians, and sort of made abortion clinics in Toronto, Ontario, and Winnipeg, Manitoba. So that's city-state if you're not Canadian. Toronto is in Ontario and Winnipeg is in Manitoba. And then from 1983 to 1985, the police just raided the Winnipeg one 3 times, but Morgentaler was never convicted. And then in 1983, they raided the Toronto clinic. And that was not long after protesters were trying to firebomb the clinic.
Of course, that's what they do.
Pro-life. I will burn down because I care so much about life.
I will throw fire at you. I love life.
Burn. So, I thought you'd said that they'd kind of backed off, but they're now, the police are still...
They'd backed off in that one state in Quebec. They backed off. Or state, territory, whatever. They backed off in Quebec. But because he'd opened them up in different areas of Canada, the different police forces were going at him.
He just loves prodding at those governments, doesn't he?
Look, the man loves providing abortions. Prodding the governments is just a bonus.
That's true,
right? Yeah. So they'd raided the sort of the clinics, and they'd raised charges against the three clinicians, Morgentaler, Smalling, and Scott. And they all appealed the charges, basically using the same argument that he'd used in Quebec. And then they all got acquitted.
Hey, again, fourth time.
The Ontario Court of Appeal in 1985 reversed the decision and ordered a retrial. And so they then challenged they basically said, that's unconstitutional. We're taking it to the Supreme Court. And there's so many different cases that he went through, right? So in 1982, the Canadian government, and I'm just going to read this verbatim. In 1982, the Canadian government issued the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, which granted extensive individual rights to every Canadian citizen and dictated that any current law which violated those granted rights must be repealed. So there was a case in 1988, R versus Morgentaler, where he basically focused really heavily on that Charter of Rights and Freedoms, which outlined that everyone had the right to life, liberty, and security to person. And so he essentially made the argument, well, if we all have the rights to this, any law disallowing abortion infringes on those rights, impedes those rights.
At least, no?
Well, really, because if you have the right to life, liberty, and security to person, right? Bodily autonomy, right? Yeah. If you've got the right to bodily autonomy, then you should have the right to abortion, regardless of medical necessity.
Yeah,
right?
Okay.
Because, it's your body, and there's a thing growing in it.
Yeah.
If you want that thing to get out, you should have the right to get that thing out.
Yeah, it's interesting, because I was reading a book called A Brief History of Philosophy, and it has a section on abortion, and it talks about the sort of back and forth between different arguments on abortion. And then it sort of ends with this idea of ultimately, while a lot of arguments about abortion focus on whether the fetus is a person or whether the fetus is conscious, all that kind of stuff. But then this argument comes in later on, which is sort of but it doesn't matter if it is, it matters whether it has a right to your body. Mm. And if it doesn't, it's a thing that's growing off of your body that can't survive on its own. Does it have a right to your body against your will? And that's sort of where that argument, because a lot of the time it's focusing on is it conscious? Is it a person? These things that can't really be answered. They're not. They're very abstract and philosophical. But then, does this little thing have a right to you to sort of sap your resources and take up your body? Well, maybe not. Maybe it doesn't.
Maybe not.
No.
And I think honestly, it's
because I don't have a right to take your resources from you. I don't have a right to just sort of
no.
Yeah,
and I think it's far more ethical. You stick a straw in my tummy and start.
I'm a person. I'm a full person, but I don't have the right to take to sort of parasitically take things off of you.
No, I totally agree. We can talk more about the ethics of this and the morality of it in a second. But ultimately, I think it's far more ethical to remove a fetus from your body. A fetus that you don't want, that's basically draining your resources and taking your nutrients and all of that sort of stuff. I think it's far more ethical to get rid of that before it's been born, before it's got any concept of life, really, rather than have a kid that you don't want and neglect it or get it sent into foster care or anything like that. Do you know what I mean?
And it's not necessarily that somebody would do that if they don't want to have a child,
No.
but they're forced to. They're not going to then just automatically neglect it. But I think a lot of the time, the arguments actually come down to a sort of, you've made the decision of how you feel about it, and then you sort of construct a logical reasoning behind why to justify how you actually feel emotionally about a situation.
Yeah, I think that people think that there's sort of a dichotomy here, that if you're anti-abortion, it's because you think abortion is awful and it makes you feel really bad and it makes you feel disgusted and you don't like it at all. And if you're pro-abortion, you're totally fine with it. That's not the case.
Yeah.
Because it's not pro-abortion, it's pro-choice.
Yeah.
Right? It's pro-choice for a reason. Because I could personally find, abortion so incredibly offensive and horrible that I would never ever, want to be involved in one in my life.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to provide them. I wouldn't want to be with a partner who got one. That could be the case for me. I could still be pro-choice because while I find it personally offensive, others don't, and it's their body and their life, and it's like, why should I force them to raise another human or go through the difficulty of pregnancy or go through the potential dangers of childbirth just because I find this medical procedure like offensive or disgusting? You know what I mean? Like, it's not your body, so back off. Like, let them do what they want to do with their body. It's not affecting you, right? This isn't like a case of like someone getting a vaccine or whatever, where if someone is unvaccinated, that's going to affect you. It's not a case like that. It's a case of like, they're doing a thing with their own body. Let them do it.
Did you see that incredible the incredible advert that was going around Twitter about abortion, where it was like, so it's like this dramatic scene, and this doctor is talking to this lady who's pregnant, and he's going, "I'm afraid that we have some horrible news about your child. Your child's got this specific condition, which means that it's going to be born, and within 3 minutes it's going to asphyxiate, and it's going to suffer an awful lot. Now, obviously, abortion is never an easy conversation, but ultimately, the decision is up to one person and one person only. And that person is Jeff." And then they talk about, I think it's Jeff, and then they have this picture of like the state governor, and then they call out Jeff and go, "Hey, Jeff, what do you think about this?"
Jerry, man. So funny. It's very good. It's very good. Back to Morgentaler and his cases. So R.V. Morgentaler, as I said, this was in 1988. He focused on the part of the sort of charter that spoke about bodily autonomy. And his argument was essentially that if you've got a 3-person committee, which usually includes only men, and they are deciding whether someone can get an abortion or not, and that causes like time delays and all of these sort of things, if all of that is going on, that is infringing upon the pregnant person's right to bodily autonomy.
Yeah.
Which, okay, so if it's infringing on that right to bodily autonomy, then you should get rid of the law, right? So he basically pointed out all of this sort of stuff. He pointed out that they were biased as well, as I said, including only men generally. So it just wasn't a workable solution. And the Supreme Court was like, okay, yeah, no, that makes sense. We agree with you. Ding, ding, gavel, gavel. There we go. Abortion is now decriminalized across Canada. It's down.
Wow, he did it.
It's down to regulation on a provincial basis. So the different provinces of Canada get to regulate
what you
themselves.
have in America now. Yeah.
Basically,
that's better.
Well,
than it was before.
Yeah, I mean, the US now is just like what's happening in the US now is that it's
sorry, I mean that in Canada is better than it was before. Not what's in the US right now is better than it was before.
Yeah, no, what's in the US right now just God, yeah. States' rights to own slaves, keep people pregnant,
to take away other people's rights.
And, like I think the states should have their own rights to do whatever they want, regardless of whether it's an awful thing or not. Jeez Louise. It's insane though, like, you mean, think about it, that there were a bunch of sort of laws that were in states that were just triggered as soon as that Supreme Court decision was overturned. Yeah. Right? Like,
yeah, sure.
That is shocking. That there are states that are like, yeah, man, we really don't want people having abortions, but this Supreme Court decision says that we can't stop them from doing it. But what we'll do is we'll have something here that if they ever overturn it, boom, immediately just, you can't get them.
Yeah. That's
so messed up. It's incredibly messed up. So, again, back to the actual sort of good thing that's going on here, way back in the 80s. In the 1988 rule, after the 1988 ruling, Morgentaler like continued like his fight against anti-abortion sort of policies. Because obviously it was down to a provincial basis. Some provinces were not being great. You know, they still wanted to have anti-abortion legislation, even though it was federally decriminalized. So Nova Scotia in 1989 tried to pass a law that stopped anyone from having abortions in a setting that wasn't a hospital, according to like basically a few criteria that they laid out. So
and that sounds on the surface like a reasonable thing until you remember that there are pill abortions.
Yeah.
And that those are included in abortions.
Well, yeah, I don't know if in the 70s pill abortions were, you know, common or whatever. I'm not sure. Maybe they were. But regardless, like, there's a difference between a clinic and a hospital.
Right.
They basically set out a list of criteria that said this is a hospital. This is what a hospital is, so this is where you're allowed to have an abortion. And obviously that means you can't have it in a clinic, you can't have it this. It reduces access.
Yeah.
It's one of those things where I find people don't really consider laws in the way that they should. They just read the words and think this sounds fine.
Yeah.
That's not how laws work.
Yeah.
At all. A law can look fine on the surface, but its implementation could mean that it's that has sort of unforeseen effects, or rather foreseen effects that people hope you will overlook. It's not all, for example, you know, sort of what they called Jim Crow laws. It's not like that where it's like, yes, black people are second-class citizens, and it says so in the law. There are laws that mean that, you know, certain groups of people have less access to certain resources, not explicitly in the law itself, but just the way that it's implemented. And in this case here, absolutely the same thing. You could say, oh, here's a list of criteria where you could get an abortion from a hospital. Totally fine. Well, if the list of criteria aren't, you know, I mean that on a technicality, some places aren't considered hospital settings. You know, that's an issue. Having no clinics means that's an issue. If you're in a place where you can't easily access one of their approved hospitals, what are you going to do? Travel across the country, travel across the province to do it? It might be difficult for you if you've got a job. If you've got a job, you might not be able to take the time off, all of that sort of stuff. Like, so it just limits access. So while it may seem reasonable, just don't put these kinds of, whenever you see these kinds of regulations on things like this, generally it's just to limit access. Same with like voting rights, right? Or with voter ID. It doesn't seem like it's a thing that would impact certain communities more than others, but it does. It literally just does. Like you can look at the sort of the stats on it, and it seems fine up front. Like, oh yeah, ID to vote. What's the problem with that? Well, the problem is
ID for other things.
Yeah, the problem is that it impacts some communities more than others.
Yeah.
So, in this case, with the Nova Scotia with the province of Nova Scotia trying to sort of limit abortions in this way, it didn't actually totally work. So, what Morgentaler did was open up a clinic in Nova Scotia in 1989, the same year that they pushed through the law. And then they arrested him on 14 charges.
Hey, again!
And hold on. What do you think happened here?
Was he acquitted by a jury of his peers?
He was acquitted by the judge.
Oh my God! Even better!
And then the province tried to appeal the case to the Supreme Court of Canada, and in R.V. Morgentaler 1993, the court unanimously ruled in Morgentaler's favor that Nova Scotia had no right to legislate criminal law. So, in 1995, New Brunswick tried to do the same thing, and it just fell down in court as well. So, like, it's not good to put one person up as the face of a movement, but there were so many, you know, women and other people behind this as well. Morgentaler almost kind of became a face of it because of how much he was in court and in jail and providing abortions, you know? So I don't want to, you know, focus on a man and be like, yes, look, abortions, man, making it about men. But I kind of want to talk about this story, kind of just to highlight that this is not just a women's issue. For one thing, it's not just women that need abortions, but also it's not just something that you need to leave to the people that you know, that need abortions, that are affected by it. Yeah. You could absolutely, you know, push forward this cause and, you know, put yourself on the line the way that this guy did. Like, he just, every single turn, he was like, I'm going to keep on giving abortions, and there is literally nothing you can do to stop me. Send me to jail, I don't care.
I'll get acquitted.
Like, yeah, they send me to jail. As soon as I go there, I'm gonna post bail, leave, do abortions again. Are you gonna send me to prison? Well, as soon as I get out, I'm gonna set up more abortion clinics. Are you gonna try and take me to court? I am going to get acquitted, and I'm going to keep on providing abortions. Like, it's just like the absolute sort of like bloody tenacity of this man is incredible. So, you know, like, he was like being attacked as well, you know, during this, right? In the 1980s, you know, he had death threats. In 1983, I think I mentioned this, they tried to firebomb his clinic, and there wasn't much damage, but, you know, they firebombed the clinic, and they did it again in 1982. Both of those were at the Toronto clinic, and that did not stop him. Like, the man was being sent to prison. He was being sent to court. He was having death threats sent to him. He was being firebombed in his place of work. And he kept on giving those abortions.
Wow.
So throughout the rest of his life, he got married again. He had another kid. The guy, you know, it's a little bit ironic. For someone that was a massive proponent of abortions, he had so many children.
Fucking out babies.
Like, he was just...
Maybe he wanted all children to be his. So he was getting rid of the others.
Yes, it was a way of reducing competition
Yeah.
Yeah.
for his own offspring.
Yeah, I mean, look, again, this is the whole thing about being pro-choice. No one is pro-abortion.
Yeah,
People
sure.
are pro-choice. You know, so he got older. His health deteriorated. He stopped working at his practice in 2006 because he had emergency heart surgery, and he got like a lot of honors. So he was an honorary Doctor of Law from the University of Western Ontario, because obviously the number of
He
court
spent
cases.
enough time in court.
Well, that's what I'm saying. No, but the number of court cases, like, I don't think you guys get it. Like, when he was in court, a number of these times, this was him going up against the state and saying, these abortion laws are bad.
Yeah.
They are infringing on people's rights. Here is why. Change them. And he actually caused like real, actual change in Canada. It's incredible. And he also, in 2008, was inducted into the Order of Canada, which is their second highest honor of merit. And that was just shortly before, a few years before he died, in 2013 from a heart attack. So 20 13 is when this man died. This man saw the Holocaust. He lived through that. He survived that, and then went on to just be the most badass guy in the world when it comes to abortions. Like, seriously, like being sent to prison, being sent to jail, being like sent to court, going to court willingly to fight against the state. Incredible. Like, absolutely incredible man. And that's the story of
What
a great
Dr.
life.
Henry Morgentaler.
That's so
Top guy.
cool.
Absolutely incredible,
What
right?
a legend.
Right, a really awesome guy. So I kind of want to talk about the ethics and the morality at this point, but this episode's already a big beefy boy. So what we can do instead is do a little After Dark.
Yes.
If you're wondering what After Dark is, it is our sort of sister show to SCI Guys, which you can only find on the SCI Guys Patreon at patreon.com/SCI Guys. You can get it there. It comes out every month. It's a very fun show where it's kind of like this, but with less of the science, less of the research, and mostly just us kind of talking about, philosophy or politics and things of that nature. So if you're interested in those kinds of conversations from us, definitely go and check it out.
I just realised that we've made a really good show, a really good science show, and then we've made what people think about when three men start a podcast, and that's After Dark. Just us talking about our opinions.
Yeah. I couldn't hold off on doing like the traditional podcast for that long.
Yeah.
Like, you gotta get people hooked in with the science, so that they think that they care about our opinions, and then we can do the actual actual podcast.
Or we don't do it publicly.
Yeah.
So now that the episode is more or less come to a close, I think it's time for a quick fire quiz.
Dun 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 dun. Abortion edition.
So the rules of the quickfire quiz are the same as every week. I will ask one question. That's one question between the two of you. The first person to buzz in with the correct answer after I finish asking the question wins. And what do they win, Jamp?
Don't.
One
No.
No.
Just say nothing.
point.
Wow.
Just say nothing.
Nothing.
So Luke, what is your buzzer?
Bang.
And Jamp, what is your buzzer?
Oh, I was going to be very similar, actually.
Oh, okay.
That's my buzzer.
So the question is, how many weeks of pregnancy is the normal limit maximum for abortions?
Mine was going to be very similar, actually.
Luke, what is your answer?
24 weeks.
Ding, ding, ding. That is correct. Well done. Up to 24 weeks, unless there are extenuating circumstances. Well, that is it for this episode. We hope you learned a little. We hope you enjoyed it. We hope you didn't get too cross that there were 3 people without uteruses talking about a pretty uterus-specific issue. So with all of that out of the way, before we go, I think it's probably time to say thank you to all of our patrons with an extra special thank you to our executive producers, Danito and Glitch Rabbit. And thank you for watching. You can find the full references for this episode down in the description. Subscribe for new episodes every Sunday, and why not leave us a nice wee comment? You can support the pod at patreon.com/SciGuys, or you can find and contact us at SciGuysPod on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and at SciGuys on TikTok too. Or you can send us an email at sciguyspod@gmail.com.
That's sciguyspod@gmail.com.
SciGuysPod
At gmail.com. You can follow me at NotCorey everywhere.
You can follow me at Jamkin everywhere.
You can follow me at Luke Cutforth everywhere.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.